The presentation that you're about to see, I've given this a number of times. I've actually written articles on this as well. This is one of my favorite topics, and I will share some of that info with you all afterwards. But this presentation that you're about to see, I actually really liked the way I did it for Fearless. So I kind of repurposed my Fearless slides. And I wanted to credit the Fearless talk because, again, I used really good graphics when I made it and last time. So I wanted to keep this one rather than reinventing the wheel. So you're going to see, I'll put little information at the end. Actually, we put out a Fearless product playbook. And Fearless is a social good um, uh, uh, software development company that's dedicated to the public sector. So we do a lot of things like help create new startups, help with organizations like Medicaid, and also, of course, try to put out content that helps other folks get involved in the tech industry. So I will share some of that info as well. And then last but not least, I just so happen to be a adjunct professor occasionally at a little art school in Baltimore called MICA. I teach data visualization, which I don't think a lot of folks know about me. That's what I actually got my master's in. It's not something I do every single day, but it is a little fun quirk about me. And then I obviously teach product management, which is what a lot of this stuff is going to be inspired by. So my name is Jesse, and I really like prototyping. So first things first, right? Let's talk about the problem. So oftentimes we are faced with a problem, right? And so maybe you're the stakeholder, or maybe the stakeholder is outside, right? Maybe you have a client. Either way, this person asks for a new feature, right? And let's be pretty. We'll try to keep things really simple here. So they ask for a new feature, and what happens is the designers say, "Look, yeah, users absolutely love blue buttons over red buttons." And then you'll have the business feasibility, the client say, well, blue is incredibly expensive. We can only afford red buttons. And then you'll have, of course, your developers pop in and they say, well, blue and red are not possible. We can only do yellow. So now you're at odds, right? This something that seems so simple. Again, we're boiling it down to a button in this case. We have an argument about, is it going to be blue like users want? Is it going to be red like the business viability says that they want? Or is it going to be yellow like developers say is actually possible? And this usually shuts projects down. Then to make matters worse, the stakeholder says, oh, they have analysis paralysis, right? Oh my goodness. If you've ever had a client say this about a team, or if you've ever been on a team that where you are experiencing this, it can be a nightmare. And just to give you some context on what that is, sorry, let me go back. Just give a little bit of context on what that is. That's when we start having everyone argue and they shut down, and you'll see groups split, or there'll be two different competing forks now of a open source software, and for some reason they hate each other. Or you'll see your team, your developers will say, look, no, we should do it this way. And another group says, no, we should do it this way. And they both argue and argue and argue. And then everyone gets super tired and gives up on the button entirely. That's analysis paralysis, when you just cannot break free and move forward. So sorry for the tiny text. Something that's really important before we talk about how to solve this is understanding what product is. Product management is not project management. And product management is incredibly important for your organization. Product is just another word for value. This is not necessarily coming from some textbook definition. This is coming from experience. I'm a firm advocate for this concept here. Product is value. If you understand what value propositions are, finding what users are looking for, finding a balance that works for the business needs, the feasibility or developer needs, and of course the user's needs, well, then you are practicing true product management. Product management is value management, right? Product design is value design. Product development is actually value development. Product discovery, we're discovering where value is. I can go on and on. Even marketing, right? What are you marketing? The value that's going to be added. Oh, this is going to make it way easier for you to deploy. oh, this is actually going to make it super easier for your users to want to come in the door. Or, hey, Mr. or Ms. User, do you mind checking out this quick ad here? Because we believe that this is really going to change your life, right? Like, product marketing is value marketing. So in order to understand value, you must be able to answer why. Why are we using a headless CMS? Right? Is it just because the technology is cool? Is that it? Because that happens all the time. And then those projects get given up on very quickly. They get abandoned. Why is this the right problem to solve? Why is Figma the better tool for design? I think everyone agrees. But why? Why are you using Figma, right? So if you're going to prototype, you absolutely have to be able to answer, why are we prototyping? We don't prototype for the sake of prototyping, although that's what a lot of us do, especially when we get started. When you first discover Figma and start using something like Figma or Sketch or one of those tools, Adobe XD, whatever you use, if you use those tools to wireframe and mock up prototypes, when you really start to get good and you can animate them and make them interactive, it's exciting. You want to prototype everything, and I'll show you. I have a Figma file called like daily projects, where every day I went in, and just because it was fun, I made a new fake application. That might be a good way to discover things that you could do or ideate and come up with things that you can do, but it's not a reason to pursue something. Prototypes are tools, right? It's not the end goal. I think a lot of people, if you've ever started a business, especially if you've invented something, if you're way ahead of everyone else, everyone thinks that you're crazy. And you're crazy until you're right? And it's very lonely. And so I know I've been here before, and I know a lot of other entrepreneurs that I've talked to, I've heard this so many times, is they say, if I only had a prototype, then I could go raise some money. If I only had a prototype, then I could get people to come and join me. What do you mean by prototype? When you say prototype, do you mean a fully functioning, high capacity, does everything product, or something that proves your point or provides the feedback that you need in order to enhance your processes? If it's the latter, then you're prototyping for the right reason. So in order to prototype effectively, you got to be able to break down and understand what types of problems you're looking to solve for. So I talk about 4 types of prototypes. You'll see these words, usability, feasibility, viability, and desirability, used interchangeably depending on who wrote the book or what the topic is. Product design uses some of these terms, product management uses some of these terms. Sometimes they get interchanged, so take my definitions for the purposes of this presentation to help set cognitive anchors for you to be able to remember in the future, oh, what type of problem am I solving? However, if you see differing definitions for things like viability or desirability, or if you only see 3 and not 4, that's totally normal. So there's 4 types of prototypes. As long as you understand what you're hoping to discover and what problems you need to be solved, you can almost always choose only one of these 4. You can do a usability prototype, which helps you better understand user needs. A feasibility prototype, which is when you want to understand if something's actually feasibly possible, right? When 2 developers have 2 different ideas, don't shut down. Hey, why don't you both work up a feasibility prototype and show us in code, or show us in our architecture? Or even sometimes it's physical, right? Like use pipe cleaners and cotton balls and glue and show me what that product's going to look like. Then there's a viability. Viability prototypes are oftentimes actually conducted in the form of workshops. They're very rarely going to be an artifact or something that gets interacted with. In the event that they are, that usually is a desirability prototype, and we'll talk about that. But viability needs are the business's needs. Whether it's literally a business or it could be something like the costs associated with running your nonprofit. Those viable needs are a natural tension, and they should not be forgotten. Now, champions of usability, like designers, will say that the user's needs are the most important needs. Champions of technological feasibility, right, innovation, folks who Maybe someone likes Python, the other group likes JavaScript, and for some reason they hate each other, right? It's like, again, why? But in that particular case, right, you'll see folks that champion their certain stack or their certain particular approach to solving similar problems they've solved before. So you'll see folks like who say that that's most important, right? If you can't actually do it, nothing else matters. And the third, the business needs. This is what you always see coming from like the big box companies, and of course, if you have clients, and of course, if you run a startup, you can have folks come to you and say, look, users really want this, and it's feasibly possible. And you may have to make a call and say, well, we can't afford it, or we don't have the manpower, et cetera, right? So sometimes viability needs can override the others. Desirability prototypes. I love this. I put an asterisk because it's kind of like a made up term. But what I like to refer to this as is I like to use desirability prototypes at the beginning and the end of a contractor effort to get an overall ballpark or an overall summary. So we'll dive in first on usability again. Usability prototypes are when we want to know the user needs, what they want, or what they prefer. This is the type of prototype a lot of folks think of when we say prototype. But when we put out one of these prototypes, we want feedback from the user. We don't have to be constrained to the feasible requirements or capabilities, and we don't have to be constrained to the business viability requirements or capabilities. So we're looking to better understand user preference. Do they want red or blue? Is this actually going to solve the user's problem? Are we missing anything? Will they actually use this? What we're not looking for is, does the client like this? Or can we actually build it? If you have developers in the room when you're making these prototypes, you're probably going to account for feasibility. If you have a stakeholder, product owner, somebody in the room, you're probably going to account for some business viability while you're making these anyways. So I'm not saying completely ignore them, but just that's not the type of feedback that we're looking for. So you got that client who's upset, right? Here we are, we're able to say, look, users want this. Very sensitive mouse today. So next up is feasibility. So when we want to know if a solution is even possible, this is when we have technological discussion, right? This is when, if you're proposing a usability prototype and your tech lead or CTO or however big or small your org is and however you distribute titles, if the technical representative, right, that's at the table, if you present a usability prototype and you're excited to get this in front of users, and that person speaking up saying, well, that thing's stupid, you can't even do that anyways. Like that's not, that completely distracts. They're not trying to be rude. They're not trying to take away from progress. They're trying to voice their expertise because that's what they do. That's their seat at the table. However, it's not the most productive time for that, right? Feasibility prototypes are. This is a time for debate. This is a time for comparing. Again, if there's two different opinions, one says, let's use Python for that bot. The other one says, well, let's use JavaScript for that bot. Have them both build some type of feasibility prototype, but it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be usable, I mean. It could literally have no UI, no front end at all. There's a lot of different ways to leverage this type of prototype, and this is the most undervalued one, in my opinion. It happens all the time. You see the developers cranking out code, open source repos that they share, and they write these readmes that tell you how to get involved, and all of that stuff's just happening naturally. If you can harness that in your prototyping, it will rapidly advance your team, and it also gives people a voice. Now, again, what we're not looking for is does the user like the way this looks, and this is good for our bottom line. So now that analysis paralysis team is assessing things, saying, well, feasibly, we can do this. And so next up, we have viability. So when we want to know what the business needs are, again, I often use workshopping, hands-on workshops with my clients so we work in the government, right? So in this particular case, like one of the business viability examples here is, yes, but now we have a new president. So that changes everything, changes the requirements, right? So when we want to know what the business needs are, again, this is to better understand those business requirements, maybe what your stakeholders' preferences are, Maybe you're comparing things like doing a cost analysis or a SWOT analysis or any of that stuff. It's also really important for when you want to be able to respond to shifting requirements. So if you do government work or have clients, every now and then they throw a curveball at you. Like, holy shit, I need you to do this now. And you're like, whoa, that goes against our plan, right? Like you want me to, we're 4 sprints in and you want us to quote unquote pivot. And basically, because they're panicked, they want you to stop everything you're doing and change all of your attention to this new thing that they think is going to solve their new problem. Sometimes you have to do it. If a building is on fire, right, you got to put that fire out, right? Sometimes you absolutely have to be able to pivot. But for the most part, when you have business viability changes, these shifting requirements, don't panic and shut down. Assess it. Okay, this is a business requirement. How can we approach this without having to completely refactor our code? Or how can we approach this in a way that is going to be scalable and sensible? Don't let it shut you down. You add it to your backlog of problems to solve. So often viability is already paired with feasibility and usability. And again, what we are not looking for here is what the user likes or if it's technologically feasible. Again, our client, now you see she's smiling, happier. Now we're talking about what they want, right? You said you want us to get under budget. You said you need this to be able to handle all of your enterprise requirements, right? Like it shows we're listening and we're taking into account what you want as well. Again, the client's voice is actually only 1/3 of the pie. I know we seek to make our clients happy. We seek to bring things that make users happy, but they're 1/3 of the pie. And if you can eloquently get them to accept and understand that, you'll be far more successful. And communicating how their voice fits in is critical to getting them to adopt this type of thinking. So fourth and most made up, of course, is desirability prototypes. These are perfect for a general direction. This is meant to help us move forward without getting kind of caught up or shut down, right? This is the type of prototype that I would do in Figma by myself that I was talking about, which I'll show you. I have like 30 projects, probably 40 projects in this one Figma space. Because I wanted to get a quick idea out and make it look as real as possible, make it as feasible as I think it could possibly be, make it solve or express business viability needs so that I can get as much feedback as early as quickly as possible. This is also useful and sometimes called an MVP at the end of a project cycle, right? So like right before launch or right before you launch an alpha or maybe your next major update. Right before you do that, I usually encourage my teams to create like a higher fidelity. We call it a desirability prototype, and basically this is now the culmination of everything that we've learned about feasibility, viability, and usability related to this. And these are the types of prototypes that you get really excited to put out there in the world. And I know we're approaching time, but we started about 10 minutes late, so yeah, I hope folks are able to stay. If you're not, again, we're recording. But I will stay, and I actually have plenty of time here to chat. I have about 30 more minutes. So why should you care about all of that, right? I know it kind of repeated a lot of concepts a lot. Really want to reinforce it, but why should you care? So it improves your overall quality of work. You don't have to be a designer in order to care about usability, right? Like you also don't have to have every single detail figured out. I'm going to repeat that. You do not have to have everything figured out before you can start designing something. Do not let yourself be shut down by what ifs, fear, or people knowing too much. A lot of folks, you see entrepreneurs, you see young startup founders that like launch themselves to success so quickly because they're not held back by past failures. They're not encumbered by what ifs or fears or anything like that. Like they're just going full send, right? You don't have to have everything figured out before you can start designing something. Just know what problems you're trying to solve for. Of course, again, you don't want to drop everything just because the client forgot that they agreed to be agile in the first place. So if they're panicked, there's a fire to put out or something like that, remind them of the process that they've adopted. And this will make you better as a consultant, entrepreneur, and founder, designer, product person, business, BD, like wherever you work at in your spaces. If you understand how to break down and frame problems, right? Oh, we're looking for user feedback. We want to know if this is possible. Well, we just want to see if this is actually going to be fit in with our business model. What problem is it? Break it down. If it's a question of all three, then break it down if you can into three separate things to test for, three smaller prototypes. You should be able to get a prototype out in 1 to 3 days. Now, if something's feasibly like a nightmare, then break it down. Right? Well, here we made it so that you can log in with your credentials to a blank page. Awesome. Didn't even have to make the dashboard or anything like that yet. The next is, well, now that we have a blank dashboard, we want to apply some of our research that we found. We want to build some components that solve for specific user problems. So one by one, we're going to create a component and put it out there, get some feedback, ask them what they think is missing. And now you've set up literally a pipeline of innovation as you go. As you solve for things, you add it. As you have new questions, you write them down. You frame it. What's this new question? Is this affordable? Does it fit in? Again, when you frame problems, you can solve for anything. So here's your innovation machine. You or your client or your friend or your user or your development team, your marketer, whomever, they're happy, right? Because you're at balance with business viability, user needs, and tech feasibility. So, any questions? Take your time. Okay, question we have is, would these things you discussed be relevant to physical prototyping, like hardware? That is a really great question. And absolutely, no hesitation on answering that. This is actually good for even thought models as well. This process can be applied to pretty much almost any place where you're creating something new. So if I were to apply this in the physical realm, for example, let's just go back to, let's go back here. It's right here, right? So if we were making physical products, in that particular case, you want to, before you go to production, right, you want to make sure that it's actually going to solve for user needs. So you're probably creating different foam molds, right? Let's say your product is a flip-flop. You're probably going to put one out there that's just a baseline. So first and foremost, let's not be held up and try to make it perfect and, oh, how thick are they going to like it? Just make one. Make it, and you put it out there, and your users come back and they say, yeah, this thing, I would kind of like it to be wider at the toe, and I'd like the foam to be a bit more dense. This is a bit too squishy for me, right? So you go back, you recreate it. Hopefully you haven't bought a $50,000 steel mold for your flip-flops, but instead are doing some with 3D printing or wax. And so you make it a little bit wider at the end. And this time when you do your foam injection, you use twice as concentrated material, right? And you put it back out there, and the user says, you know what, I actually like the thickness of this, but now it's too wide at the toe. And so you can iterate, right, quickly and get feedback from the users. From the feasibility, it may hit a certain point that the user's like, I really need, it's tough enough. And so feasibly, you may find that you cannot pump in a dense enough foam to make it as tough as they want using this wax mold that you have. So it's like literally not even feasible. So you would then have to say, well, how can I? Well, I'm going to have to make a steel mold, but a small one, because I'm still testing myself. And so feasibly, you've now created a new mold. And now you're able to pump in, 4 times the density and get that thickness that the users that you're putting out there are saying, oh, we love this. And then, of course, viability. If you're going through this whole process and making that steel mold is now going to cost you, $1,000 to make your prototype mold, well, that might complicate things. And that might mean that you don't make a steel mold and you hit back to the drawing board and be like, how can we make a thick enough shoe so that we can get the feedback that we need without spending $1,000? Maybe you have that money. So maybe you need to go raise that money because that's your blocker now. You have to make this prototype. You need to get this user feedback. You don't want to spend 50 grand to send this to production yet. It's going to cost you $1,000. How can we raise $1,000? That is a business viability problem to solve for. The same as you would prototyping. How can we raise $1,000? Well, we could sell t-shirts. We could start a streaming service. We could go ask mom, like our friends and family, right? So that's a perfect example, actually, and I'm glad you asked. I guess I didn't apply it to hardware, but same thing. And any other questions, feel free to drop them in. I'll also, since I have you here, I'll show you the Figma file I was talking about. So when I first got into Figma, it happened long before I started this actually, but when I wanted to get really serious about it. I just started hopping in and every day was trying to paint like a high picture. Actually, it was called Daily UI. And it was like a challenge they would send me every day. And so I was just so excited. You know what I mean? Like every time to try to make something, try to make new logos. They're not the best, right? These were all made in about 4 hours. This was like an early iteration of what Angel's social product could look like. And, I used real components and it was a lot of fun. But that just because this was a lot of fun doesn't mean that it's 100% even feasible or going to actually solve any business needs. But it does give me a baseline and help me discover things as I go, right? I'm able to animate these things. And so I use Figma a lot for almost all of my prototyping, even workshops with my clients. I'll usually use FigJam now instead of like Mural. I don't work for Figma, by the way. So this is not a paid sponsorship. But I've just found that I really like these tools because I'm able to bring my clients into the same space that my designers are working. And then of course I use GitHub. To discuss feasibility requirements, business requirements, and document everything. So here, we want to set up these systems of innovation is what I like to talk about. So if we go to like OMI, for example, OMI is a number of self-organized working groups. And many of these are feasibility groups, right? That's most of the work. Some of these things, like our website group, for example, are going to be focused on drawing in new people, product marketing, right? It's a value marketing. OMI is not a product; it's not for sale. It's an open group where we choose to work together. So the way that we're able to manage our work is actually have a holistic backlog. And so this allows me to track our tickets across all of those repos. And when they add new tickets, I can actually drag these things in right now, right? So like some of these things are feasibility, some of these things are more complicated, and we're able to have discussions around these. And so folks actually I can go to this issue here and we're able to discuss and debate and share our prototypes. And so between Figma and GitHub, that's pretty much 90% of my workflow these days, because it helps me make very clear sense of usability, feasibility, and viability and get people involved in the process. That's how you get that innovation mission. Let's see, looks like we have another question. So do you have any resources for helping people learn Figma? What a good question. So Figma itself, if you've never used it, is incredibly easy to get involved with. It's free. So you can go to figma.com, just very quickly create yourself a profile, and it doesn't cost you anything to get started. Really has a wide community. Folks are enthusiastic about Figma. Figma is a perfect example of what it's like to build a product that your customers are obsessed with. I can say it speak for myself. I often say I love Figma. And so that's how you know you made something that's really between those three, the triumvirate of value that we were talking about earlier. So Figma community has a ton of built-in how-tos, and they get updated every day. Folks share free plugins, they share free resources. I actually made if you type in roadmap, I think my contribution is on this list somewhere, but mine is it's a thematic roadmap. So because here you go, this is something that I use all the time, and so I decided to make it into a template for others to be able to utilize, and I actually use it myself. So you can actually just click duplicate, and what that sets you up with is an open environment. You're not going to mess up their original thing. This is my space, or you're in your space now. Sometimes people are nice and they give you instructions on how to use Figma and how to get involved. And this thing just makes a really nice step-by-step, high-level thematic roadmap so that you can take yourself and go from the overarching problem you're looking to solve, and break it down into key themes, goals, and of course milestones. So Figma community is huge. Also YouTube and Twitter, there's tons of other resources out there, but I'm actually proud to say that Figma itself is the best resource for learning. Let's see, next up. Yeah, not everyone knows how to work with it. Totally. And if you want to pick on a product that people get intimidated by, GitHub is probably the most intimidating of all. I don't know why, a lot of my designer friends get so spooked about having to meet me in GitHub to do work, or folks will say, "Oh, I've really got to brush up on my GitHub in order to get." It's so easy to use, and I actually created a how-to, which I'll share with everybody. I created an OMI how-to, so this is called the OMI GitHub strategy. View it. Oh, here we go, right here. Cool. So this step-by-step walks through how OMI is an open source group, so you can hop in and actually see it for yourself and follow along. But this step-by-step walks through how we use GitHub as an innovation machine. It often starts with discussions, right? And when to use discussions. These discussions usually create comments and lively discussion, naturally, that we can automatically turn those comments into backlog items. So we can create different backlogs for different projects. And as I've shown you, we can have a holistic backlog that all of these things feed into, right? So the holistic overview, which I just showed you. It talks about how to use the projects, how to add sticky notes to your backlog, right? Like maybe you don't have a fully fleshed out thing. It's just, or something really simple like don't eat food, right? It's so simple. We don't need to discuss it. It doesn't need to be broken down. Just don't eat, and it's in progress. This is like a sticky note, but let's say something gets really complicated, right? Like eat food and you find out someone has a food allergy. I can actually convert it to an issue, just like that. And I can just say, you know what? Actually not everyone can eat PB&J. So find new menu, right? And I can convert this to an issue. I can choose which repo I want to put it on. Which team is it associated with? Well, it's associated with the overall group, and I can convert an issue, and then we can have a conversation about what people can and can't eat, right? So again, quick and dirty. I will share this out in the chat right now for folks who want to get comfortable. It's so easy to use. It's so much more than just sharing code, but this allows you to meet your developers and your feasibility deliverables where they are and not have to juggle 15 different tools, right? That's what I got so tired of. Notion is an awesome resource. People are starting to fall in love with that like people did with Figma. I actually found myself really liking it, and then it just became a source of guilt because I'd be like, oh, I didn't update my Notion yesterday, and now I'm behind. And so I've tried to simplify my life, and now I actually take I write HackMD like markdown files every single day. Here you go, like every day. I everything that happens, screenshots and all that, I dump them into a very simple markdown file, and then I post them to my own private GitHub repo. I'm happy to talk about that sometime too. So let's take this back here, and I'll share this out with everybody. It's very quick read, and it breaks down using tagging, breaks down how to set up issues. So you can automate creating issues. You can automate tickets moving on the backlog. All that stuff breaks down issues again, readmes, how to add files, creating new repos, and of course, wikis. Cool. All right, pasted that in chat. Let's see. That's all I have. Nobody else has any questions? Cool. Nick, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to get involved with this group. I believe in what you guys are doing. I know oftentimes we're all on like working ourselves to the bone with other things, and just the fact that we're even able to come together in conversations and collectively advance together, that is beautiful, amazing, undervalued, and I hope that we can keep sustaining this. So thanks so much for having me. If you want to get in touch, just go to alton.tech. I'll share that out as well. It has all my links on here, projects that I'm involved with, how you can get involved. And I have plenty more presentations in the tank, so maybe I'll come back again.